welcome everyone. I'll do the welcoming over again. And just to welcome all of you here to a very exciting program, Oral Histories as Curriculum, bringing African American history to Florida's classrooms. My name is Paul Ortiz. I'm a professor of history and director of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. I've been the director since 2008. The program tonight, in many ways, is both a culmination, but also part of the odyssey and the journey that the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program has been on since 1967, when we were founded by Dr. Samuel Proctor. Samuel Proctor was one of the pioneers of the oral history field. He was a president of the Oral History Association very early on in the existence of our organization as an international disciplinary association. I was honored to be president of the Oral History Association as well back in 2015, 2016. So how did we arrive here? We have a wonderful panel coming up. I was asked to kind of do a little bit of a preview and to talk about the work of the Proctor program, especially in terms of African American history and African American studies. So one of the things that makes our program unique is that from the very beginning, Dr. Samuel Proctor started our oral history collections interviewing people who normally were not being interviewed by other oral history programs. And so the first real marquee collection that we developed in the late 60s and early 70s was with Native Americans, both people who were part of federally recognized nations, but also lineage groups and peoples who were struggling for federal recognition, like say the Porch Band of Creek Indians in Alabama. Holocaust survivors, African Americans, union organizers, refugees. That's really the foundation of our oral history program and collections here at the University of Florida. When I arrived in 2008, I was approached by a number of individuals, including then President Bernie Matchin at UF, Joel Buchanan, who is a legend and an African American historian here, and a number of others, to say that what can we do at the University of Florida to enhance and build our oral history collections in African American history? And so we started a project at that time, Deborah Hendricks, I think it was called African Americans in Alachua County Oral History Project. It quickly became statewide, and then it became regional-wide, and then nationwide. And what was so exciting about this African American Oral History Project is the institutional support we enjoyed from the University of Florida. We got a tremendous amount of support from the Office of the Provost, and how we really talked about the collections were that we wanted the University of Florida to become a national leader in African American history, especially in oral history. And after several years, that's happened now. Scholars from all over the world come to University of Florida, and thanks to our digital collections, they don't even have to travel here. They can look online. And people all over the world now are using our oral histories. And so we really have come a long ways, but we have a long ways to go. And what I mean by this is that as a historian, or as historians, we're trained to do certain things, and we do certain things really well in oral history, and there's other things that we don't do so well because we were not trained to do them. And so the thing that we do really well, I think, is, archival research, preparing interview guides, field work. We're all kind of field work junkies. I mean, even when I was in grad school at Duke, I was known as a person who was, where's Paul? He missed another seminar. Well, he's out in the field interviewing people. I mean, I much prefer to be out in the Mississippi Delta or the Black Belt of Alabama or the Florida Panhandle interviewing African American elders than actually being a graduate seminar. I guess I shouldn't say this. Maybe my dissertation advisor is watching. Could get into trouble. Of course, I did my PhD about 20 years ago. But be that as it may. So we do the interviewing part really well, I think. We teach courses here at the University of Florida on oral history. They're very popular. Our students love the field work. They love going to the Mississippi Delta. They love going to Immokalee, Florida. They love going to Palatka, Florida. They love going to Lithonia, Georgia, the Virginia Tidewater, and all these places we do oral histories. But a thing we were not taught how to do was how to kind of break it down. How do these oral histories, how can we make these oral histories work in a K through 12 classroom setting? How do we make the oral histories that we do with African American elders in, say, the Arkansas Delta or rural Alachua County, how do we make them relevant and usable for a high school teacher in Putnam County or in St. Johns County? That I do not know how to do. And so that's why I'm so grateful for my dear colleague, Dr. Rebecca Cordova, who you're going to be hearing from a bit later, because that's part of her incredible expertise. Another aspect of this project, and as I kind of close down my remarks, is to say that our journey in really doing African American history and not just the research, not just the scholarly part, but getting it out into public educational contexts and settings, including K through 12 classrooms, is getting support, both from our university. I mentioned the Office of the Provost has been incredibly generous in supporting this. Thank you, Joe Glover, if you're watching. But also the National Endowment for the Humanities. A couple of years ago, or actually a few years ago, we applied for this grant, which Dr. Cordova will be talking more about, and other colleagues too, and we called it ReAnimating African American Oral Histories of the Gulf South. And the idea was both to use the grant to make our oral histories findable, searchable, usable in public education settings in K through 12 and beyond, but also to really use these new techniques of artificial intelligence and voice recognition and machine language processing and say, hey, we have hundreds and hundreds of African American voices. How can we improve our educational reach? How can we educate people about the unique perspectives, the analyses, and the histories of Black people in Florida and beyond? I'm going to close now. I was asked to announce just a couple of forthcoming events, which when we conclude, we'll remind you about them. We do a lot of public programs at the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. You might say we're public program junkies. We take that public education aspect very seriously. And so on your way out, or as you're kind of milling around, please look at the tables. There's a lot of great educational material. By the way, there's a People's History timeline of Gainesville here, which I really invite you to take a look at a bit later when we're wrapping up. Our students worked really hard on putting that together. And it travels, by the way, too. If you're an educator, if you work in a community center, we have multiple copies of that panel. Carol Richardson has been using it at the Aquin Jones Museum to great effect. Some of you may have seen it there. One public program I want to lift up to your attention, on April 12th, Wednesday, at Pugh Hall, we are premiering the film titled Oscar Mack versus the Ku Klux Klan. This is a real historic event for us. This film and this event will bring together descendants of a man who stood up against the Florida Ku Klux Klan in 1922 in an armed confrontation, and will also bring together the descendants of one of the members of the Ku Klux Klan, and they'll be here with us at the University of Florida. This is a story you don't want to miss. It is a story, and earlier today, some of my staff were on with members of the National Park Service. We're working on a project on the Underground Railroad. We're interviewing descendants of freedom seekers of the Underground Railroad all over the continent and really all over the Americas. And when we told our National Park Service colleagues at the Harriet Tubman Center in Maryland about the Oscar Mack story, they said, wow, this is like the Underground Railroad in the 20th century in Florida. And we said, yeah, it really is. So this is a program you will not want to miss. April 12th, 5 p.m. here in Pugh Hall, Oscar Mack versus the Ku Klux Klan. Because there's educators here, I would be remiss if I didn't point out two other opportunities for teachers and students. The Gainesville Veterans for Peace, the 13th Annual Alachua County Peace Poetry Contest, and there's a deadline coming up of April 3rd, 2023. If you're a teacher, if you're a student, this is a great opportunity to get younger people writing poems about peace. We talk a lot about bullying, we talk a lot about violence in our society. This is a chance to get kids talking, writing, expressing themselves about peace and nonviolence. And then lastly, again, Gainesville Veterans for Peace, we're offering 4 $1,500 college scholarships. The deadline for that program is April 28th, 2023, and the main criteria is you're a student in Alachua County. You either came up through the schools here or you're currently going to school in Alachua County. It doesn't have to be college, it could be vocational, it could be, you could be studying to become a nurse, it could be an apprentice program, et cetera, et cetera. So I think with that, I will turn the podium over to my dear colleague, Dr. Rebecca Cordova. Thank you again, everyone, for being here, and it's going to be a great evening.
Thank you, Dr. Ortiz. I appreciate the welcome message. Welcome, everybody, to our public program tonight. Much gratitude to our panel of educators and to the linguistic team here that is joining me as well tonight, in addition to all of the folks that helped us set up the room and get ready for y'all to come and listen to what we have to say tonight. So my name is Rebecca Cordova, and I've been an education researcher here for, I'm going on my 10th year at the University of Florida. And my areas of specialty, I guess you would say, is making classrooms better for young people to be in. And I do that in many different ways. One of the ways that I do that is work with teachers to make sure that their climates and conditions in their classrooms are comfortable and honoring and very justice-oriented. So specifically right now, the project that we're working on is pretty much rooted in how do we make African American history in K through 12 classrooms be the foundation for that type of rich learning environment in the classroom for both teachers and students. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our work right now in that regard, and we'll have a nice evening together. Can you give me the clicker? Forgot. Yay. Okay. So we're going to probably talk about a lot of different things, but one of the focal points that our current work and research is using oral histories as curriculum, like Dr. Ortiz mentioned. It's one thing for the University of Florida to have all of these files and archives. It's another for them to be actually accessible for our communities, especially considering these oral histories, they belong to the communities. We're just honored to be housing them for a period of time, but they're not ours. They belong to the communities. But right now, a lot of people can't access them, and that's on us to provide the access to make it better. So one way that we are able to do that is to basically look at these oral history files as how can they be pieces of curriculum that can be easily utilized in the classroom by teachers and experienced by students. In this picture is one of our most recent trips to Putnam County, where we conducted several oral histories of graduates from Central Academy in Palaca. So when we talk about oral histories as curriculum, we're talking about live time stories from people that are currently living that have a lot to say about what we're teaching in the classroom, and they have a lot to contribute. And we don't harness it well enough. We're trying to change that. So I just want to bring this back a little bit to this idea of education standards. As you probably know, African American history in the classroom, especially in the Florida classroom, is something that people are talking a lot about. And honestly, they have been talking a lot about it for many, many years. It's not new, but you probably are seeing it, hearing about it in maybe some new ways now than maybe you've ever heard about it before. So here's just a very brief snapshot of curriculum in schooling in general. For those of you who don't know, what we teach in schools has been basically debated since the very first opening of the very first public school in the 1860s in this country. This is not a new question. This is the oldest question that schools grapple with. What do we teach, and why, and when, and how? So when we talk about it now, it's just our current version of a very, very long, tense discussion amongst everybody. When we think about the goals of schooling for the last couple hundred years, usually the goals of schooling are actually fairly nationalistic. They use content as the medium for nationalistic identity. So for the last couple hundred years, schools have kind of these competing interests. There's the content, and then there's these other pieces like how do we support good citizenry? How do we promote a good democracy, right? There are all these other goals that schools have, and sometimes they are aligned and sometimes they're not. So the conversation about what do we teach as curriculum has always had these kind of pull and push political landscapes to them, and we're in the middle of another one right now. Regardless of that, Florida has 2 laws in the books that require the teaching of African American history in each classroom. And you can see them up there. One was written in 1993, signed into law in 1994, making it required that schools teach African American history in the classroom. And then again in 2020, that there needed to be evidence for the teaching of the Ocoee Massacre in African American history in Florida's K-12 classroom. So these are requirements for Florida schools to teach. Now, these are unfunded mandates. These are mandates without a significant amount of accountability or responsibility. So it's really left up to the school and district to determine how they do this. As you can imagine, schools and teachers could use some support in what does this look like? How do we do it? What does it look like in kindergarten? What does it look like in middle school? What does it look like in after-school programs, right? So as Dr. Ortiz mentioned, we want to support Florida schools and Florida teachers to meet these mandates. And one of the ways that we're trying to do that is to use these oral history files as primary resources. So when students learn about African American history, they're learning it from elders in their communities or communities surrounding their communities. The name of our research in our grant is ReAnimating African American Oral Histories of the Gulf South. So we don't only have oral history files from Florida. We have them from other states as well, although much of them are from Florida. We're using all of as many as we can that fit the definition of the Gulf South to basically create pieces of curriculum for teachers and students to engage in so that the curriculum that they're experiencing is localized and as rich as possible. There are 2 components of our grant, and Dr. Ortiz did mention this. The component I know the best is, of course, the education component, and that's the one that yields actual materials, tangible items for teachers and students to utilize. The other is the linguistic component, and you'll hear from my colleagues here in a moment about that. But overall, the entirety of the grant is about accessibility. Accessibility, honoring, and making sure that what the University of Florida is so honored to house, that we're able to, I wouldn't say give back to the community because they're not ours, but we want to make sure that they represent our work in the community, that we're here to serve the community, and I think that definitely means that we need to make sure that everything that we have is something that makes a difference in young people's lives. There's no reason to collect these stories if people can't hear them, or if they're not making a difference in people's decision making or the way that they see their own history. So we want to kind of do a better job of that as a university. So these are the 2 pieces of the education. There's entire lesson plans. They're all aligned to the Florida state statutes, very specific around history and civics. This includes the revised Florida state statutes. We make sure that there's no teacher that would want to teach these lesson plans that would be in misalignment with those standards. Then there are curriculum activities, which include guided questions that accompany the transcripts and the video of the oral histories, and then small group activities for students to analyze primary resources. Right now, the portal for all of these materials won't be available until next year. We're currently hard at work on that. But we're hoping that as we get there, we'll be able to have more and more kind of community meetings like this to hear from teachers, to hear from students, so that this is really a dialogue instead of just us thinking that we're doing something that's helpful. We like to also be accountable to the community and have them tell us what is helpful as well. So, on that note, I would like to hand this part over to my peers in the linguistics department. For time's sake, they will introduce themselves, and let's give them a nice round of welcome.
Hey everybody, I'm delighted to be with y'all today this afternoon. My name is Ryan Cheeves. I'm in the final semester of my master's program, so I'm a student here. And I've been working on the project here in a variety of roles. As an annotator of data, I also work with topic modeling, where we take collections of oral histories like what we have here and do some nice fancy coding and machine learning on it to get it to tell us what those interviews are about. And I've been working on the project for about a year and some change now.
Hi everyone, I'm Christina Jean-Philippe. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. I've been working on this project for about 2 years. I'm a major in linguistics and certified in AI and machine learning. So I've worn a lot of hats on this project with annotation, transcription, working with data collection, and even training models. So really excited to talk to you about what we've been working on. Today we are going to be talking about African American language. So moving on with simple definition. What is African American language? In essence, it is just a language variety spoken by African Americans. You might know it by several other names, AAE, AAVE, Ebononics, or even Black English. However, it is important to know that it is only somewhat mutually intelligible with Standard American English. What that means is if you have no prior experience or knowledge with African American language, then you should still be able to understand the majority of what is being discussed in a conversation. It is very important to note that it is not broken, it is not slang, it has its own grammatical structure and pattern, which is what we're going to discuss moving forward. One of the ways that African American language can be misinterpreted as slang is due to its lexical items. So that's going to be with vocabulary. And part of the reason is they have a very direct correlation with what are the words used in Standard American English. If someone says I, it's very clear to know that is all right. However, some of the other examples listed, if you have no prior knowledge, you may not quite be able to understand without further context clues or explanation. So, moving forward with oral history. As we've previously discussed, it's very important that we are bringing first-person sources into the classroom. And that means that we want these topics to be ranging from education, from marriage, from the civil rights movements. And they have the ability to broaden the understanding of who these AAL users are. And they have the ability to combat some of these biases that are associated with the language, such as carelessness, ignorance, or even youth. As we've discussed, these are spoken by grandfathers and grandmothers, and as someone who's worked extensively listening and transcribing these, it does add a huge level of richness to be able to hear within their own voices and hear the emotion as they're talking about their life experience and things that we only typically get to interact with textbooks. So, with NLP...
And I didn't like it because I never had nobody do me like that.
Even from that small clip, and I never have nobody do me like that. You kind of want to know what else is she talking about? Where's the story? Where's the hook? And that's what we really want to be able to bring into the classroom and give to the students and to the teachers. So, with potential issues with natural language processing and African American language, is that typically these corporas are not trained with a lot of resources that are based in African American language. That typically they also may have biases baked in by the annotators and the linguists who are working with this information. And one that you may be commonly experienced with in your day-to-day life and know about is automatic speech recognition. And typically these models that you know of, Siri, Alexa, Google, they have trouble understanding African American language users, which kind of omits them from being able to utilize these resources. And part of the bias is that this is a youthful language, this is associated with a younger population that is better equipped to handle these technological barriers. But with our grandfathers and our grandmothers, we know they don't need any more barriers with working with technology. It needs to be as simple and easy as possible. So the goals of our project, we want to be providing clear transcription guidelines moving forward, so annotators and linguistics know exactly what not to omit and what exactly is so valuable to include. We want to make sure that the AAL history is accessible to classrooms, and we want to educate the public on the value and the importance of AAL, which is why we're so grateful that everyone is here today. We want to provide these materials to help mitigate some of these technological disparities that AAL users can face. So moving into one of our main patterns that we look for and study in our project is the pattern perfect done. And it typically operates in Standard American English as a have X, which means it states that an event has already concluded and it has already been completed. So if you say, yes, we ran all of our errands, and yours too, then you're saying this has already been concluded. It's a set in stone. There's no need to elaborate any further. But linguists and annotators could edit that to be, yes, we ran, or yes, we did run. And there's a variety of examples shown just within these four given of how these slight alterations can impact meaning. One of the main ones is, for example, if your grandmother says, I done told you to leave my flowers alone. A clear alteration could be, I already told you to leave my flowers alone. But this creates a new meaning in stating that it's simply not the first time this boundary has been given or been communicated, which in baseball terms, essentially, you're only on your first or second strike. You still got plenty of other chances. You still got the rest of the game to play. It's no problem. However, the original meaning is this is something we have extensively established. You are not to touch my flowers. This is essentially, once again, you've been playing this game for 3 hours and you have not hit a single ball. That dramatically changes the condition of what is occurring in the situation that is happening. And if you have that AAL context and understanding, you're able to approach it with that new meaning. However, if you edit, if you annotate it, omit it, then you're having a loss of meaning, of tone, of implication, and even within the time frame of what is being discussed. And when you're discussing oral histories, that's something that really cannot be lost and something that's really valuable to maintain. So I'm going to leave the rest of the presentation to Ryan.
All right, thank you, Christina. So the next feature that we're going to talk about today is something that we would describe linguistically as the absence of a third person S. So to give you a little more background information, English is kind of unique in the sense that no matter what subject you use, the verb isn't going to change that much. But there is an exception of the third person, he, she, it. You'll see generally in Standard American English, you'll see an S. He plays, she plays, he thinks, she thinks, etc., etc. In AAL, in third person, you don't need to have this S marker. It's okay to leave it out entirely. So in the middle column, you can see examples like the following. She played too much. It don't look funny. It don't look funny to you. He want this one. You don't have to have that S marker that we see in Standard American English. And while an example of how technology is involved with this, if you were to type she played too much into your phone, it would probably autocorrect you to plays. Well, you aren't committing a violation or a typo. It's just a different variety of English that isn't always recognized by the technology. Another feature that we have is something that we would describe as the existential it or they. So in AAL, it or they can also be used to demonstrate something like in Standard English, there is, there are, in Standard American English. What's unique about AAL is they can use existential it or they when Standard American English, that option isn't really available. So when someone in AAL says, it's a river up past the house, that same one-to-one meaning of, in Standard American English, it doesn't have quite the same meaning. Standard American English, they would probably say there is. So whenever you have people that use, in AAL, there's more options available in the existential category, and it's important to make sure to leave them as is in the audio and not correct anything. Another important feature is something that's called multiple negators or multiple negation, sometimes called double negation. This is a feature that tends people to be misbelieving that this is not proper or this is not correct English, but really the double negator in AAL has a unique purpose that we just don't really see in Standard American English. It's used to emphasize the negation and make the negation emphatic. So in the middle columns, you can see multiple negators like ain't, never, and nobody, like in the audio clip that Christina played. There's a emotional and strong emphasis there in the negation that if you were to change it to something like on the right, I have never had anyone, this is completely lost. As linguists, it's essential that all these unique features of language are preserved. The way that people say things is deliberate, and we ought not to change them for any reason. An example of how this meaning is lost, if you are to change an utterance, the meaning is lost. This is a great example of that. On the left, it says, we don't be bothering nobody up at the school. You could change that to Standard American English and say, well, they mean we don't bother anyone at the school. Well, that meaning is completely different. Saying that we don't bother anyone implies that we're not bothering our classmates or people that are with us. But in the original meaning, there's an emphasis of nobody in a multiple negators. Maybe they don't bother anyone but their classmates or their teachers. There's no one that they bother. It's essential that we leave in the original text as meant with the emphatic negation. The final feature that we have to talk about is something that's called the remote past bin. This is something to use to indicate that the time period that the speaker is describing happened quite a long time ago, or it's that a state of being has been held for quite a long time. So in the middle column where you see, I've been cleaned up the kitchen, it would be easy for someone to change this to, I already cleaned up the kitchen, but that's not what it means. It has a bit of presupposition to it. I cleaned up the kitchen a while ago, and you should know that I cleaned up the kitchen. It has a completely different meaning that if you were to change it to something like, I already cleaned up, you totally miss out on it. The second example, we've been left her little baby shower. It means that it happened a long time ago, and it's been over. If you were to change it to like, we have left, you completely miss that meaning of something that's happened quite some time ago. So this is a little visualization of how remote past been is used in AAL and how it differs from past tense in Standard American English. The first two you can see use the remote past been. In the first example, he been swam means that the swimming is something that happened in the past and it's over. It doesn't relate to the present in any way. The second example, it does relate to the past. Swimming happened in the past and it can be ongoing. They contrast with Standard American English, where he has been swimming has to be used to represent the past and the present, and he has swum has to represent the past perfective aspect. They're quite different. So just to conclude why these features are important, it's important to understand these features for a huge reason is the historical accuracy. These interviews are tremendously important to people. They talk about very intimate personal details in their lives, and it is essential that we capture that as accurately as possible without changing what they said. It also provides a deeper comprehension of these oral histories. Understanding what people mean when they talk about their daily lives is very important, and making sure that we understand these features helps people understand what's going on in these interviews if you're not familiar with this type of data. And very importantly, it also provides a very rich and very diverse material for students. There are so many interviews that have so many different topics. They could be used to teach students about a tremendous amount of topics. That's all for the linguistics team.
Thank you so much, Ryan and Christina. You did a really marvelous job. Let's give another round of applause for all their great work. So as you can see, the scope of our work at UF with this particular project is it's a lot. It's big because we want to make sure that when we say at UF, here is some material for you to be used in your classroom, we want to make sure that it's good, it's right, that it doesn't harm anyone, that it's not intentionally silencing anyone. We want to make sure that it's historically accurate. We want to make sure that it promotes rich discussion and analysis. There's no shortage. If you get on the internet, there's no shortage of lesson plans. There's no shortage of material, right? So it's not so much that there needs to be more, it's that there needs to be some that is rich in localized experience, that has been supported by local teachers and students in its creation, and that it's a give and take between the university and the communities in which we serve to make sure that we are doing our best to honor the stories here. So as you can see, it's not just about curriculum. It's about making sure that when we hand over a transcript for an oral history, that it's accurately transcribed. And if computers are going to do the transcription, we need to make sure that the computers understand African American language. And not just the computers, but the humans too. So, humans, on the note of humans, let's talk to some real humans over here who've been waiting patiently. There's a couple slides to introduce our panel up there, but they'll have a minute to introduce themselves as well. But we are honored to have a small group of educators here who are going to chat a little bit with us. I have, starting here closer to me, I have, Dr. Stella Arducer. The bios are kind of switched. And then at the very end is Dr. Carrie Wells. You can read a little bit about them. And then we have, next to Stella, is Tracy Amberbride. And then next to Tracy is Carlonda McTeer. So they are here today to talk to us, share some of their wisdom. They've got to hear our presentation. They know a little bit about the work that we're doing. And the way that I see it is they're the real experts. They're in the district, they're in the classroom, they go to work every single day thinking about these dilemmas in different ways than we do here at UF. So we want to make sure we allow and promote the space for the real experts to have some say in what's going on. So real quick applause for our panelists. Oops. Whoa. Hello, and that's over now. Okay. So, panelists, would you just a couple seconds of introducing yourself, and then I'm going to ask the first question for you to put some thoughts to.
Yes. Hello. Ooh, I don't have to be that close. Hi, I'm Stella Arducer, and I'm over instructional materials in the Alachua County Public School System.
Hi, I'm Tracy Amberbreed, and I teach a class called Spirited Girls at Pace Center for Girls here in Alachua, and I am also certified for 6 through 12 history and K-6 elementary.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carlonda McTeer, and I am a science teacher over at Pace Center for Girls.
And my name is Carrie Wells. I'm a second grade teacher at Wiles Elementary School.
Thank you very much. Tracy, I'm sorry. Why did I think it was Amber Bride?
It's because that's how it looks.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I kind of imagine like you're like in a bridal
I say it
situation.
wrong intentionally all the time. No worries.
Okay.
And I just want you guys to note that you can tell, like, the teachers from the person in the legislation. I'm like, I'm ready to answer the questions.
Yes.
Made me nervous.
All right, so we have just a couple of questions. And I made them up, so feel free to deviate and answer a different question if you'd like. But here's a question that I hear asked to me a lot, and I figure, well, maybe you'll have some thoughts. So as an educator, what are the ways you see your role in teaching the content of African American history? What is at risk when this content is not taught?
All right, I'll start. So I kind of feel like I have a unique position being an elementary educator because I may be the first person to discuss these topics with children. And I take that role very seriously. And I kind of begin each school year, and definitely when we hit some sensitive topics, saying to the kids, these are sensitive topics. And you guys might have some big feelings about this, and that's okay. And you are free to discuss them with each other. You're free to discuss them with me. If you want to talk privately afterwards about something, that's great. If you don't feel comfortable raising your hand, that's okay. If you do want to raise your hand a lot as we talk about things, that's wonderful too. I value your input. And, you know, for me, teaching African American history is not a lesson plan. It's not a month. It's the entire climate in my classroom. If you look at that back table, there's a good variety of books back there that I brought from my classroom. And I want my children to see themselves in my room. I want them to come to class and feel like my space is welcoming to them. And I know that there are a lot of teachers who are a little afraid right now because of what we hear in the news and what we read in articles. And if I do nothing tonight, it's to inspire you to not be afraid of that, because we have a really important role. And we have to take that role very seriously. And I go in each day planning lessons that I think will get my children thinking and talking. And I want them to feel as though I value their understanding of knowledge. You know, we talk in second grade, you ask any child in my class, what is Brown versus Board of Education, and they will tell you the year, and they will tell you why, that court case existed and what the outcome was. And they'll tell you about Little Rock 9, and they will tell you about Ruby Bridges, because these things are really important for them to understand. And we just can't shy away from those topics, especially for me being a second grade teacher, because this is their foundation for everything moving forward with that type of education.
I'll be happy. You want, because I'm, okay. You want to go? I'm going to go. I'm going to go.
No, I'm going to go. I'm going to go.
But then I'm going to go after you.
Okay, that sounds perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
So I think that I have a fairly unique situation as well. At PACE, we teach 6 through 12, all girls, and our school is predominantly African American here in Alachua. So with regards to my classroom, it is a very safe space, and they know that coming in, going out. My classroom is adorned with a lot of, pro-African American faces, figures, things of that nature. In every aspect of what I am teaching, whatever the content, I find a way to add some type of African American history or someone in the present, try to make it applicable to their lives. So it's actually fairly easy for me. I don't fear anything that's necessarily happening because it's just so ingrained in my classroom and my structure that there isn't anything necessarily for me to fear. And more than that, I feel very empowered actually to teach them about themselves and their history. So I don't, for the most part, I don't fear these new regulations, or rather, like you said, old arguments. So I think that I'm in a position where I'm okay, if you will, with teaching the content, being present with the girls, and them feeling okay about it as well, and feeling open to ask questions and participate and want to learn more. Because for a lot of them, even though they're in 6 through 12, it's the first time that they're hearing things about themselves, which is interesting.
Yeah. Okay, are we family here? Are we family? Okay, guys, because I'm not going to even play with you. We are afraid. And we in Alachua County have the largest achievement gap in the state, and we understand that. We also understand that people come to class, and whether it's the teacher or the students, with implicit biases. So my job over instructional materials is to teach teachers how to stick to the facts. This happened. I am a daughter of immigrants from Angola. I was not taught that white people enslaved Angolans. I was taught Portuguese, the Portuguese. Facts. Stick to the facts. Our legislation while people may say it's trying to scare us, it also may give other people excuses not to teach it out of the fear, but they don't want to. So as someone who's a supervisor, I'm like, oh, you're gonna teach this because AAL. You're gonna teach this because you're gonna stick to the facts and you're gonna keep your way out of it. You also can't assume that kids are coming and you're the first person to teach them. Because I came with some knowledge I could teach you as a teacher at 5 years old because I'm a daughter of immigrants. People who came to the States as unknowns. The United States and Angola, they were not claiming them. And the Catholic Church had to help them. So I come with a story, as they were mentioning, linguistics. I will not focus on, is AAL, right? I will not focus on AAL because there is academic speech. Let's be for real. UF is not gonna read an AAL essay. Do not come in my class as your reading teacher. Speak in all kinds of ways, because I'm gonna be like, come on, there's a time and a place. But you also have to understand that there's an assimilation process that you have to learn so you're not shut out of the American dream. But in no way, shape, or form should we take out African American history because of legislation. Because if you read it, it just says everyone has equal rights. It's true. Now, some people violate that, but for many different reasons. Dr. Cordova is as white as all can be. I mean, she is. But
That's true.
she is so true. But if I'm not careful in how I teach it, my African American students might not know that she's an advocate for change, and she can teach them just as much as I can. Stick to the facts. That's what I have to do, because, like I said, if we stay afraid, we're gonna give people excuses not to teach what happened. So that's the long and short of it for me. Yeah, I'm kind of, y'all are looking at me like I'm angry, but I just want to be real. Yeah, because I just don't want, excuses are not okay. And with legislation, sometimes people will use that for their agenda. I'm in the legislation. And I know that you all want to think, oh my God, but there's ways around it, and that's what we do, because we think about the kids. We're in it. Like Dr. Cordova says, we're in the trenches now. We're going to do what's right for kids, but we're also going to stop teachers who may not be doing what's right for kids well. And it's a small minority of them. But they're the reasons why we have to have some of these in here too. We have to be honest about that. We are protecting our students, but not allowing things like this to stop them from being educated, which includes African American history.
I'm not.
Thank you. I'm not angry, I'm just really passionate, like she said. I really am.
I'm not sure how I follow you.
Oh.
So I work with Ms. McTeer, and which puts me in a unique space as well. My class is ostensibly life skills. They used to refer to it as a sex, drugs, and rock and roll class. The sex part is being taken out. Yeah, so, but historically speaking, what I want to do with the girls for me is give them as much accuracy as I can, and to give them the space to say what they need to say to a safe white person. From my perspective, that if you say, oh, all white people, oh, Miss Tracy, I'm sorry, you don't need to apologize to me. I'm not worried about this, right? Say what you need to say and learn what you need to learn, because there is so much we don't know. There's so much I don't know. And one of my greatest benefits of working at PACE has been my own learning and uncovering the stuff I thought I had uncovered and shooed away. And not because I was interested in hurting a person, but because I grew up white in the South, right? And you have to be honest about, you grow up how you grow up. So what do you take out? What do you learn? And I have found that if you don't have direct interaction with people who are different from you, you don't really learn that stuff. You might have an intellectual understanding of it, but you don't have an application of it, and you don't have the connection to people who are being harmed if you don't have those interactions. That's what I have found for me. So in my classroom, also a very empowering classroom in really different ways from McTeer's, but during the pandemic, it gave me time, since we weren't in the room for a little while, to be able to step back and figure out how I wanted to welcome anyone into my class. And there is artwork. My room is full of artwork. Some of it's from some of my students, but there's this big African-American woman head. That sounds strange, but it was on my door for Black History Month, and now it's this big piece on my wall, and in her hair are the names of national historical important Black figures. And then she's posted on white construction paper, cardboard, whatever. And I have local important Black community members' names there, most of whom I know, some of whom I don't, but that I had people giving me information on because they needed to be represented in my room. And then with our staff, who are Black members who are in there. So I try to get the kids, when I do Black history projects or history projects, and I tell them, you can't do Harriet Tubman or Rosa Parks or Ruby Bridges or MLK, and they'll, why can't you do them? But Miss Tracy, why do I want you to choose someone else? Who have you learned about? Because that is what's on repeat through most of K-12, these 4 very important figures, but there are so many others to add to that, and they're left. And that is the thing that I try to bring to them as best as I can. And I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. And I want to point out that I appreciate you embracing your whiteness, because you saying, oh, I'm ashamed to be white isn't helping the cause. You know what I mean? No, I'm just saying, because sometimes there's that comfort comment. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. What are you apologizing for? Exactly. Embracing who you are and that sense of belonging, that shows that you are addressing who you are and you're embracing that, so you are real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to own up to mistakes. I can tell you, last year, Women's History Month, ooh, I trod into it all wrong. Really great intent.
Yeah.
Bad steps.
What did you do?
I talked about white ladies first.
Oh my gosh. But that's okay, because that's what you see in the mirror.
Yeah, absolutely.
But did you just stick with white women?
No.
No, you did?
No, I
Tell
did
the
not
truth,
just
Tracy.
stick with
Tell the
white
truth.
women.
Your kids will call in.
No, I had a whole nother thing, and now I can't even remember that group, because it was something I didn't know about that I learned about before class, and that it was the way I processed it, right? So I did what I knew, and I stepped in it, and they were upset with me, and I apologized, and we talked about what do you want to learn? What do you need from me, right? Because if they can't say that to me in a space like PACE, then where are they going to say that, right? Because teachers mess up everywhere we are, right? Yes. We're human. We make mistakes. We have our own perspectives and our experiences. I see the world through my lens, which is different than yours. And different than yours, and different than Carrie's, right? Yeah. So it went with kind of my learning and my becoming a feminist in 1990, right? So it was 100% just part of my history. And it was no ill intent, and it wasn't even that I was leaving anybody out. But what should I have done? Started with the Black ladies.
Because of the people in your room?
Because of the people in my room. Yep.
Just to kind of bounce off of what Tracy's saying, even when I do Women's History Month as well, and I wanted to make sure I was very intentional with who I chose. And I'm having the kids complete a journal of 10 individuals. And I picked, again, kind of people, like today we focused on Ethel Payne, who was one of the first very well-known Black journalists in our country. And she was one of the first journalists to actually be let into the White House to question presidents back in the early 50s. So picking people with intent, I think, is so important, so that children see, I also am including Anne Frank this month, because I want them to see, a lot of kids don't know about Judaism. So making sure that we choose people, Frida Kahlo, very intentionally, because that is forming the foundation for their understanding moving forward, and to see women represented, who has a hijab, a woman who has a hijab on, a woman, we did a big project on Serena Williams, so they see someone current as well, so they don't think of this as, oh, this is just history. And even seeing people, not only African Americans, but seeing there are still Africans making a big impact as well. It's not like, I feel like they think like, oh, slavery happened and time stopped in Africa. I feel like a lot of kids don't have this timeline of, this continued as well. So we learned about Wangari Maathai, who was the first woman to win a Nobel Peace Prize in Africa. So having them understand that that's, like concurrent history as well, is super important to me.
So we have about 4 more minutes. Anybody want to say anything else, or feel like they have one other thing to say, specifically maybe being beyond yourself? Not that you can speak on behalf of our profession, but let's just pretend you can. Because not everyone's at PACE, and not everyone is in the district. So what do you think other teachers, if they came to you and they're like, well, what should my role be, and is it really that big of a deal if I don't teach it?
Whoa. Right. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, the biggest thing that I was going to say was, with regards to what she was saying, if that was to happen like in a place outside of our classroom, I think one of the most important things that transpired after the fact was the debriefing that happened, giving the students the space to express how they felt in the moment when they felt like they were being dismissed. And so, but then that teacher receiving that and not just brushing it away like, well, whatever, we here now, this is where we at. And so that, to me, is, I feel like, a component that's missing in classrooms, where it's just like, well, you're a child, I know what's best, and I apologize, so like that's the end of it. So I think the most important part is, like, these children are smart, they have brains, they have emotions, and they can speak, so they can definitely, tell you how they felt about it, and then everyone can come to a conclusion about maybe the steps that should be taken in the future about how you approach the content, or whatever it is that you're doing with them, especially if you're in a classroom, even if it's just one African American, 0 African Americans, because others can be offended as well.
So what do we do if someone says it doesn't have to be taught?
Right, like,
So am I
is it really
in a classroom, or
Yeah,
am
is it really
I
that
out in
important?
the community? Like,
Yeah, that's
am
like
I
two
on
different-
professional speak, or am I on Tracy speak?
Tracy speak.
Tracy speak, they're going to get some words, right? So how can you not teach any aspect of history? And we look at our community that has such a significant disparity in achievement or opportunity gaps. How could it even be a rational thought for someone to say, we don't need to teach African American history? I mean, I would have the what you say, right? Like, of course we do. And even if your blinders are like this and you can't see anybody else who doesn't look like you, I am enriched through knowing that history. I am a better human and a better educator, mother, whatever, all of those things, because I have more knowledge of experiences that impact the fabric of our world. So how could it ever be a consideration that something as powerful as the history of a people robbed of their history, how do we... I lose words, which isn't often.
But I think it's kind of like Dr. Arduzer said, people are using this now as a crutch almost.
Yeah.
Was that?
Okay,
I couldn't hear what he said.
that note.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, I know, it sounded like there was.
No, it sounded like
Yeah, I
I'm
was
speaking
like-
now, sorry.
Okay.
No, I was just going to agree that I think we could use this law or the laws that are coming out as a crutch, but I think instead we should kind of push it further. And that's what I hope teachers start to do.
So not all of you probably have always been in your current position. So thinking about your your position as an educator over your career. Can you speak a little bit about kind of your own learning around being an educator in teaching African American history? Like, what has your own personal or professional trajectory been in a short, kind of a short little bit, and where you are now in teaching it, right? Like, in this moment in your career, your knowledge, your confidence, your concerns, all of the emotions that come with it, especially in this political time and place. What are the supports that you feel have been great for you? And then what are the barriers that you feel like you consistently feel like you run up against? So that's kind of like a 3-part question, and I can repeat it, but we have about 15 minutes or so.
Well, I can make it quite short, because at a training, Superintendent Shane Andrew, I believe, put it best. He says African American history is our history, is American history. And in a room filled with a diverse population, but majority of them white, and he's white, that was powerful to me, because that's the expectation. And sometimes it starts from the top. And so if he's telling you that there is a need and there is a desire and there is definitely the expectation, then you don't fail. But it starts from the leader. And so when he said that, I knew that despite this legislation, that we were going to do the right thing for kids and teach them the facts.
My trajectory, I did my Master's of Education at the University of Wisconsin River Falls, and I lived in a town that was about this big. There were 1,000 people. And so I was doing some of my in-classroom, like public school classroom teaching, and I asked why we didn't have MLK Day off. And one of the teachers said to me, well, we don't need that off. And I kind of looked at her and I said, well, in the Twin Cities, because that was very close to where I was, they have it off. And she said, oh, well, they need it more there. And I looked at her, just why? And I said, I think we might need it more here than they need it there. And it was one of those things, I had already come to my intellectual political space, right? But seeing those differences and people who share the same career, so it kind of surprised me. I suppose it shouldn't have, but it surprised me. So from that space to then moving, I grew up in Gainesville, moving back to Gainesville and being in a space with far more diversity than the little country town I lived in, and getting to be a part of helping educate that. It's been super important to me to be able to have engaging activities, trying to make it relevant to students. We took kids to the Cotton Club. Is it in Porter's Quarters? But over there, it's very close to Pace. And Ms. Vivian Filer was amazing. I hope you have oral histories with her, because oh my gosh. And seeing how that impacts and expands the kids when it's not this, right? Reading history can be really boring. I have a history degree. I love history. I got my history degree because I didn't learn much history at Buchholz, right? So it's fascinating and amazing, but what we give to kids in high school and middle school is really very dry and not as interesting. And so you have to find ways to bring it in. And to me, that's been what I try to do, is to find a thing that is, especially because I don't teach history, right? So I have latitude that perhaps a civics teacher does not have. And the barriers is, I think, me, stumbling over my own self, getting out of my own way, making sure that I ask the questions I need to ask, because not much else gets in my way. Right? So I think often teachers are their own barriers. Mm-hmm. And it's real easy to not want to change something because, we get stuck in our ways and our curriculum, and this is what's worked for us, and right? It happens. So I think that's been one of the biggest barriers, but I will say that the legislations have unnerved me to no end, because while I very much want my fist in the air and to scream exactly what I think, and I do that privately, I also don't want to go to prison.
And you could go.
Right, right. So, like, and while I hear Carrie in saying, I hope more teachers push back, and my first thought is, yeah, they can't put all of us in jail.
No, I
But
think
I don't know, maybe they
but I
can.
don't think she meant pushback, but to not let it be that crutch, and to understand that we can still do our jobs.
Yes.
Because there will be people who use this and say, oh,
As an excuse, oh, don't have to do anything.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, absolutely.
I'm not
So,
supposed to do this.
right.
I don't know if I answered or not,
You
but I'll stop
did.
talking.
No,
I lose track of
No,
my
you
thoughts.
did, Tracy, you did great.
All right, so for clarity, so where I started in my education with regards to how I thought about teaching and then where I
Yeah,
am now.
what has been your trajectory in teaching? It's led you to your place right now, how you do this work?
Well, the trajectory has always been the same. I'm black.
Yeah.
Let's just start there.
Yep.
My parents are black. My grandparents are black.
Who else is black?
My whole family is black. So it has always been instilled in me to learn my history. So it has always been imperative. It's always been important. It's always been a staple. So the trajectory has always been the same. And then it just increased once I attended an HBCU, Harold Wildcats. And, you know, when you go to a school with a great educator such as Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune,
Oh, wow.
you can't help but feel the need to educate people about your people. So the trajectory has always been the same for me since my inception. And so that's why I say I don't necessarily have any fear within my classroom about teaching them about themselves. And naturally, if there were other individuals of a different race in the classroom, I again make sure that it is a safe space, but I want to let them know that I want to make it clear we will be talking about their history, and you know, this is not to make you feel uncomfortable. This is not to make you feel singled out. This is to educate you as well. And so, how I came in is how I am now, and probably more empowered. So the trajectory for me has always been the same.
I'm gonna push back on you though, because you said you went to an HBCU, and I came here to University of Florida, so you got to be in an environment where everybody looked like you.
They only look like me.
That's what she said.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
That's what I said. See,
But
she's already-
because I wanted to make sure that you understand that
I'm
it's still
pushed
very
back.
diverse, though.
I'm still pushed back.
Okay.
So, how do you find your position when you are dealing with those who are not African American? Do you feel like you are also responsible for shaping their experience with African Americans and really making sure that you tap into their any type of confusion or any type of, because I also believe that that is just as important as us just talking to each other. So I'm going to push back on you for that.
I absolutely feel responsible for that because I know that they live in this world as well. Yeah. So I do make it my business to ensure, that I'm not just being one-sided and, like you said, speaking the facts. So I clearly have my own experiences and my own stories and things of that nature, yes. But I don't necessarily have to push that. I'm pushing, like you said, the facts and the information. So at that point, now it's on you as far as how you're feeling about it. Mm-hmm. But what I'm providing as far as content is the facts, and then we can have that dialogue and discussion around, what you came away with, how do you feel about it? Is there anything that will help you to grow from, what you've learned? And that's really the questions for everybody. I mean, it's not even like white versus black. I mean, that's really for everyone. So when I teach it, it's not even like, okay, this is for the black people. Y'all right. Just hang tight. No, it's like really, it's right. For everybody. Right. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely do feel responsible in that way.
But then you have that, like, looking at them, I'm very proud of you, but I was like, yes. you did a great job, look at her. But, and there's also that bias, like we're so proud. And I'm not sure if white people feel the same way when they see each other, because this is something that comes natural, like this is something that's expected.
Yeah.
It should be expected for us as well, but there's also that.
Yeah.
Like we get so proud when we see us, but at the same time, we have to understand that everybody's on this journey with us.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I wanted to push to make sure you said that, to clear it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Because you're real power to the people, and I love it.
Yeah, I absolutely am. And I know that you can see that, but I also feel like
Absolutely.
that's okay too.
Yes,
and
it
I
is.
can be both.
That's right. That's right.
Before Carrie talks, I just want to interject one thing, because Carlonda said it's not about trying to make somebody uncomfortable, and I know that is a lot of what's in this legislation and this, and I'll let this talk for me. We learn more when we are uncomfortable than we learn when things are easy. So to me, it is such an invalid rationale for trying to limit and suppress an education. If everything comes easy, you will learn very little. You learn you can do things easily. I don't understand why we're worried about people feeling uncomfortable. My children, all of whom are white, do not think that they are somehow responsible for the horrors of our ancestors. They weren't there. They know that. They know they have impact now. What are they doing now? So I just yeah, okay, go ahead.
So initially, my doctorate's in special education, so I was a special ed teacher for many years. So my advocacy work was really focused on, children with disabilities, autistic individuals. But then I left education. I taught some grad classes and stuff, and I came back to public education in 2018. And I knew I wanted to teach general education at that point. And so really my advocacy efforts sort of shifted at that point. And then the pandemic hit shortly after I came back to public schools. And I really took that as an opportunity to educate myself as much as possible. I attended, there's a wonderful, it's available each summer, African Studies program for teachers. And if you see that email, if you're a public school teacher, I highly encourage you to participate in that program. You get to write a research article, you learn so many different cultural elements, geography, you learn about different fabrics, different architecture, religion, music. It's an amazing course. And from that, I was very inspired to actually write a Catalyst for Change grant, another wonderful resource for teachers in Alachua County. And I was a 2-time recipient of Catalyst for Change grants. And they're really actually looking for progressive projects where you are bringing something unique into your classroom. So the first year I did it, it was to help children find their voice as writers through introducing them to diverse literature. So I had like $2,500 to spend on books for my classroom. So building up my classroom library was very important. Again, it goes kind of back to what I said about representation. I want children to see themselves in the books, in the posters on the wall, in videos I share with them. So picking each of those books, and I really dug through tons of book lists, and I actually have, if anyone wants to see, I have a wonderful book list I could share. But so the pandemic kind of put things on pause in a way that allowed me to educate myself to be a better teacher. And I think the one thing I taught the first year that we returned, I taught Digital Academy for the first like 2/3 of the year, so that was completely online. And I think a big lesson for me was African American grandmothers and how much they helped their children. And it was eye-opening. These grandmas would sit with 4 kids, 6 kids, cousins, everyone was coming over to their homes and sitting around a dining room table and learning, and we did amazing things. And I worked off of that. So like Friday afternoon, we would do like a cooking class together based on a book we had read. I would get these grandmas involved, and it was amazing. And the sense of community that I saw, the sense of coming together. I had one grandma who literally had 6 kids at her house, and she built out these little like study carols for each child at her home. She had 2 different internet connections set up in her house, and she would come and check in on each kid. She had kindergarten through high school sitting in her home, and it was a beautiful view into family life that I myself did not experience, and that that sense of community that I saw, I didn't read about it. It was kind of like what you were saying about experiencing something. That sense of community that I saw was beautiful. And I try, if you come into my classroom now, it looks very different than other classrooms. It's all dining room tables in my classroom because I was so inspired by these grandmothers working with their kids at tables that I have 4 dining room tables and the kids all work together in groups all day long. I have a couch and the kids get sit on the couch to work. And it inspired this autonomy I wanted to give to my students to empower them to embrace their own learning. But it was really inspired by grandmas. And so I actually had school board member Tina Certain visited my classroom, and we talked about kind of how different my room is. And bringing her into my classroom, and she actually read a book to the kids, and I have a women's history timeline, and she added herself to my timeline. And she's kind of a piece of living history in Alachua County. So even to bring in people from the community and build those relationships is crucial to, teaching in our schools right now. So I think that what I saw during the pandemic was truly like inspiring to me.
So for the last few minutes, if you could ask the University of Florida for something to support your own goals around teaching African American history, what would it be? What could we do?
We should not have the largest achievement gap with the University of Florida next door.
Yes.
Agreed.
And the University of Florida has to take some ownership in that. So I would ask for some ownership from the University of Florida. Go Gators.
Yes, ma'am.
They got all my money.
Mine
And
too.
so I would like some help.
Yes.
Because that, to me, like the research, thank you, that's fabulous. But the research is going to tell you the same thing time and time again, that we have inequities.
Yeah.
Where are you? Where are you?
There's a program through the museum called Scientist in Every Florida School, and you could actually just have scientists zoom into your classroom or come into your classroom. You could sign up. It's really cool, and they'll choose lessons that align with whatever lesson plans. But if we had something like that with people from the university, even like the linguistics instructors, like if they could come into our classroom and they were available. I don't know if that already exists, but if that were put out there more, where people could just come and speak to something, just the availability of speakers in the classroom would be wonderful.
Literally what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I would piggyback a little bit here as well, in the sense of we get a lot of interns at PACE. Not as many, I don't think any actual teaching interns. The teachers get interns, but they're not. That's not
an education
what
department.
that's not what the intern is learning. But we get a lot of counseling ones, and we also have this amazing woman who's working on her PhD in school psychology coming in. I never remember her first name. I say it wrong all the time. She's doing a project with our kids. It's part of her PhD, but she didn't know about East Gainesville. She didn't know about the disparities between our students and the opportunity gap. And so how is she learning in this community? She's not a Gainesville native and doesn't know where her resources, where they are more needed. So, and I realize that that's not like the thing you can do, but like, there needs to be, we have this highly esteemed university that does not reach out to an awful lot of its population of the community where it lives and breathes and multiplies, right? And then I would love to have some oral histories come to my classroom.
My God.
I would love to know how to access that, or to set up field trips with our kiddos. Or you could, I don't know, come interview them. They'd probably think that was pretty cool too, actually, to be a part of an oral history.
So it's funny that you said that, because I'm not sure if you remember, I spoke to a couple of you already. So even though you just said that, I came here about 3 weeks ago on a tour, and I toured your department, And I literally said the same thing. So clearly we're on the same wave. It's the visibility. I mean, again, you have this massive university here, and they're nowhere to be seen in the community. I am not a native of Gainesville as well, but I've been here now for 7 years, and the visibility doesn't exist. And so it's about this institution reaching into the community. That's what the big ask is for. And I too, for what you can do, because you said, it's maybe some things you can't do, the department, I would go further than even to say, because you guys are often, I guess, the girl talks, putting something more like consistent. So not just we showed up one Tuesday, hey y'all, bye, we never see you again. So the consistent coming into the community, creating partnerships with community organizations, that are like right in your face, that we're easy to find. We're right there.
We have a lot of input from members of the Divine Nine that come to us at PACE, which is amazing and wonderful that we have them coming there. And
that's the National Panhellenic Council, sororities and fraternities.
Thank you.
So they might not know Divine Nine.
Okay.
I want to specify.
Yeah,
Zeta Phi Beta is
yes.
one of them.
Thank you.
I sure did. I sure did.
But I say that because it was mentioned in one of those potential pieces of legislation about removing the Black Panhellenic groups from universities in Florida. And what they bring to us is priceless. Immeasurable, thank you. And I am certain if schools, the fully public schools, were to reach out, that they would happily go there as well. Yeah.
So probably have a lot more to say. Let's move into question and answer, unless there's something you had on the tip of your tongue you wanted to say before we move into that. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Where's Adolfo? Sorry. Oh, Donovan, you have the microphone?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have the microphone here, everyone.
We're going to have, I'm sorry, Donovan, give me 1 second. We're going to have about 15 to 20 minutes of question and answer. Of course, we're not going to be able to answer everyone's question. Like, maybe we won't. Maybe we will. I don't know. But you'll be able to contact all of us after the program if you want to continue the conversation. And then just so you know, there's an entire corner over there of resources, books. Please don't take any of them, but please take pictures of them. And if you're interested in talking more about them, a couple of us will be over there to answer some questions as well. But let's go ahead and Donovan, you're up.
Okay, we've got a first question here.
Hi, I'm a retired or former teacher, and I think a lot of what is driving some of this legislation is this push for parents' rights. As a retired teacher, it's my understanding that parents have always had rights.
Yes.
So it seems to me that this is one of those shields that maybe is being used to push a political agenda. So I just wonder if you could speak to that.
I think when you talk about parent rights, it's more so our Classroom Libraries Act, not necessarily the African American history in classrooms. And the classroom libraries is mainly being able to make sure that they're age appropriate and grade level appropriate literature in the classrooms. And so, like I said, it's a small minority that make this a big deal. So when they talk about parent rights, you are absolutely right. We've always had them. I'm saying we because I'm a parent as well. At the same time, there's just trying to be some more streamlining, and we have to be careful that this doesn't give the wrong people an excuse to hurt our children and to make them less educated.
I was going to say too, earlier, and I kind of forgot to make this point, but the relationships that we have with our parents, especially parents who maybe did not always feel welcome in school because of their own failures in school or not feeling accepted, it just making parents feel welcome is so important to building those relationships with the students in your class. And I have parents from years ago who know that they could still contact me and I'll help their kid read or, help them through some social issue that the child's having at school. Those are the parents that I focus on right now, that relationship building, and try to ignore the other stuff that I see as much as possible.
How long have you been retired? Okay, you've had enough of a break. So come see me afterwards. We need some classrooms filled with teachers. And I can tell you're highly qualified. You've been up on legislation. Thank you very much.
Stella, no recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
How do we allow these loud
Yes.
to set an agenda that doesn't suit the rest of us? And why do those parents get to pick what is determined in curriculum?
Absolutely.
Legislation that decides curriculum. What about those of us who want our children or our grandchildren to have African American studies?
Speak more loudly.
Absolutely.
I really think that's it. Speak more loudly.
But understand that African American history isn't being removed from the classroom. We're not allowing that because we're sticking to the facts. And so that's how we're getting around that. These are the facts. Now, teachers putting in their own perspective needs to be tampered down. That's where we have to have more control, but we're being very specific. Like, you need to teach this. This is still a priority, and this is still Florida state standards. Yeah. And we have our system to back it up. And that's why you're not going to see a lot of people debating against what we're doing in our classrooms in Alachua County, because we have a system in place to where if you have an issue, we're prepared, because we ultimately want to do what's right for the kids. And we don't think we can go wrong that way.
I think too, seeing that AP African American history not being offered in the state of Florida has kind of gotten mixed up with some of the book stuff and kind of the legal stuff. And that was one specific program. I am completely opposed to that decision.
Me too.
But I think that has kind of everything's gotten a little cloudy, I think.
All right, we've got another question here.
I thank you guys so much for coming here and speaking today. Just to kind of pull in a lot from what I've personally gotten from these presentations, we just mentioned the issue of almost like standardization of this type of Black history, in the state of Florida, and how it is being attacked or suppressed and, inadvertently eliminated by teachers who are afraid of this. And all of you I would have loved to have had you guys as my teachers in high school or K through 12 at all. But I'm from Texas, so I can't entirely speak to Florida K through 12. However, not every teacher is exactly as outspoken and as experienced as you all are on these sensitive topics and issues. And so standardization is a really great way that we can integrate these really important historical concurrent topics alongside the rest of history. And then we've just mentioned the standardization of African American history is being squashed out of Florida right now, and even in the AP sector, which is where you get a lot of people going to college who take these AP classes, these higher intensive classes. And so I guess my question is how do you propose to possibly make that standardization more efficient to where, like you were saying, stick to the facts?
Correct. To
where teachers that aren't as outspoken or passionate will still feel comfortable teaching this without the fear, of going to prison, or who maybe aren't comfortable speaking out against their local politicians or being active in school board meetings. Like, how do we make sure that every teacher, regardless of their level of activism on this, can still teach what needs to be taught?
Absolutely. Well, we have curriculum maps, and we also have curriculum specialists in each core content area that really provides that professional development for our teachers. And that's important, to have those conversations open, but to also empower the teachers and prepare them should conversations be had because kids are curious how to really navigate them, because they should go from teaching to facilitating now, because our kids are coming with all kinds of curiosities and we can't shut those down.
There also is a process for approving like curricula that's used in schools, and they're actually going through the social studies curriculum right now.
Yes.
And I was recently asked by PTA, actually, because I used to be very active in PTA. I was asked if I knew any parents who I thought would want to participate in that process, because it's teachers, it's parents, it's a large group. And actually, some of the parents came back to me and they said this curriculum approval process was very interesting because they gave us very set things to look for. And one of them, gasp, was signs of CRT in the K through 12 curriculum, which is a complete misinformation because there isn't any K through 12. That's college level instruction. That's not K through 12 instruction. But, you know, even being aware of something like that, is there a panel of people that are approving curriculum right now? You know, is that something I can participate in? So kind of, I think, heightening your own awareness about what is going on currently and how you can participate in that as a citizen, as a parent, as a teacher is really important.
And we have parents on those committees, because I'm also over textbook adoption, and Dr. Rame, who is the curriculum specialist, does a great job of making sure that the community has a chance to actually look at it and delve into it. I saw a gentleman here earlier that was at Kannapolis Middle School looking through the curriculum that we're considering. So it definitely is a community effort. Like she said, just opportunities are there, but the streamlining is happening through curriculum guides. Like, these are the standards, they have to be covered in this timeline.
And I would add to that, for people who are in school becoming teachers, who are learning to be teachers, that universities need to be doing more in that space to be teaching best practice methodology, to be teaching the facts. And given those resources, right, I am loud and get indignant and righteous. But I don't know that I would have when I was 23. Yeah, I would have, but not.
Let's say Trey.
But not in this space. I wasn't a teacher when I was 23, right? But it can be super scary to use your voice in a way that makes you visible, if nothing else, that brings attention to you. I have had people tell me I shouldn't be allowed near children because they didn't like what I had to say about something with education. And I just was like, well, tell my children that and my students, whatever, right? But that's not something that everybody can kind of weather. So I think that universities and colleges need to be doing more to teach methodology for teaching histories and more professional development for the teachers that are there, because best practices change, because books come out that weren't there, because something new came up that you didn't know about, right? We all have to keep learning whatever career path you're in. You don't just stop once you start the job, right? So I think there's a lot of that, because the more informed you start, and then that you keep getting, the less you have to argue, because the work is already being put in, right? And then as far as like parents, community members on panels, please join, because part of what happens is you get the small minority who speak real loudly and become super active. And if you paid attention to everything that happened at the school board the last 2 years after COVID, the school board campaigns, if you watched, if you attended, you would see the ramping up of people who are supportive of these policies that are more restrictive, right? And I would argue Alachua County is better off in that space than, actually, I don't even have to argue it. Alachua County is better off in those spaces than a lot of other counties in Florida, because of the population here and because there is a lot of community activism. But use your voice. If I can be sued or thrown in jail for teaching something
that Jane down the street disagrees with, and she doesn't have a kid in my school or even a kid, but she heard Miss Tracy is teaching something that might not fit in exactly right, and you can use that against me, well, then let's use our voices to make sure that our teachers are being more supported so that you don't only have to, look out for the loudmouths. Like, be a loudmouth.
I would say too, from a teacher's perspective, elementary teacher's perspective, we have, if you look at my schedule, the first 15 minutes of my day, so when the kids are still trickling in, and I have a 15-minute period during the day for social, so I have two 15-minute social studies blocks, which by the time you get books out, pencils out, et cetera, it's done. I know. But social studies, history could be infused into every aspect of your curriculum. I add it to my science curriculum. There are amazing scientists who are women, who are African American, who you could incorporate into your science instruction. In my reading instruction, we have a phenomenal resource in this district that few people know about, and it's called Reading A to Z. If you're a teacher, you can access that, and it has a million different small leveled books about all sorts of African American history. And it goes into, again, you'll find scientists, you'll find political figures, you'll find some civil rights leaders, et cetera. So all of that is available to us, and you could add that into any aspect of your curriculum. I have not added African American history into math yet, but I am certain if I put forth some effort, I could probably do that as well. So just think about ways that you could incorporate, every discipline into what you're teaching historically.
Wow, that's thank you guys. That's such a wonderful answer. So some questions for the linguists in the other panel here.
They were like, we're here.
How much of linguistics, artificial intelligence, and technology can be utilized in the classroom? So I guess this is for both of you, both groups there.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, so good question. So I'm working with something called topic modeling as a kind of a personal research project where we take interviews like what we have in the history collection here, and we feed them into an algorithm that's able to roughly generate the topics that are common in these interviews. So an application of something like that, if, for example, we have lots of interviews of people's accounts of going and doing military service. We could apply, using the topic model, we could see what's the common things that are associated with military service. What did these people go through? And by looking at those things, we can hopefully develop some curriculum around teaching things about military service or community. There's a lot of local history and local places in Alachua County and around Gainesville that are mentioned in these interviews. I can extract that information from the interviews, and we can work with people that design curriculum to get those topics talked about in the classroom.
And also on that, I guess with that in mind, what impact does regional linguistics have on the future of AI software? And what possibilities does something like this offer?
Yeah, in the United States, we have a tremendous variety of people from all sorts of countries and all sorts of backgrounds that results in a great amount of linguistic variety. There's millions of people that live here and millions of people that speak all sorts of different varieties of English. And so we're hoping that, we have these things like Siri, you can talk to Siri, you can talk to Alexa. Well, what do you do when Siri and Alexa can't understand your variety of English? And so by working on establishing things like we were talking about, Christina and I were talking about transcription standards for representing language, if we're able to train things like Siri and Alexa and other technology with more data that represents the wide amount of variety we see in this country, then we'll be able to incorporate that into our into technology in the future.
Awesome, thank you guys. One more question over here.
Wait, Christina, you wanted to?
Yes. Also, another thing to really note is diversity in technology benefits everyone. When these models are trained on a variety of speakers, it's going to work better for everyone overall. So this is an instance where there really is no loss to adding more data, incorporating more diverse speakers.
Hi, I'm Shanika Coleman King. I'm faculty in the College of Education, and so it was really good to hear from you all and hear some of your thoughts. I know There are some of us over there who are trying to, make sure we're out in the community. In fact, we launched the Aquaba Freedom School last summer, and we're coming back again this summer to work with 80 kids, K through 12. Anybody in here looking for a summer gig, come and see me after.
What is it
Shameless
called?
plug, Aquaba Freedom School. And I think one of our faculty who works over at Pace Center doing some work, she's also the project director, Taryn Brown. But one of the things I would love to hear more about, and you touched on this a little bit, is just what you would like to see, how teacher education programs, you mentioned African American study, preparing teachers to work towards teaching African American studies, and we've revamped our program now. It's in its second year to center equity, and so what are some other things though you think would be helpful in teacher preparation that would have helped you on your journey, or that could help upcoming teachers on their journey that we might want to consider that we haven't already?
Do you guys mind if I speak to that?
Okay.
Do one. So I've actually had 2 interns from UF, one this year and one last year. One from there's a new program, the 4-year program, and I had one from the 5-year program as well. And I had very similar conversations with both of them about this. And the biggest takeaway is you guys are actually doing an okay job, but they come into public schools and they're not seeing what you're teaching. And so, they come in and they're like, oh, we learn about these great books and, everything. We learn about UDL. We learn about so many wonderful things to do. And then we come into the classroom and most teachers are not doing any of this. So I think they get discouraged and probably begin their teaching career thinking, I learned this in class, but nobody's actually doing this stuff. So I'll just move forward not doing it. So I don't know, maybe more support even from like a liaison that comes and could kind of see what's going on in the classroom. Because if you guys aren't seeing it and you're teaching something and then they don't see that in action, like it's great that it comes from a textbook, but if they don't see that happening, my intern goes back and she tells all her friends, she's like, here's what is going on in my classroom. They're like, oh, we don't see any of that. So she's kind of like the person teaching her peers because they don't get to experience that. So I think someone that works between the university and the schools to ensure that they see good examples of that.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
So, I don't want to come to you. You come on to me.
Yes,
Because you
that
have all
too.
the state-of-the-art beautifulness here at the University of Florida.
Yes.
Come to my classroom, see what I got, and do all of those things with what I have with my kids.
Yes.
Because it's going to be different.
Very much
It's
so.
going to be different.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm saying. Come over. I don't want to send them to camps here at the University of Florida. It's not going to look like that when they come back. We just don't have that. And so and internships, while I love them, you're also closing that student to that one type of teaching as well. Yep. Come do your research. I'll open up my schools to you. What? Yes, ma'am, if you're going to show up. And if what you're telling me about my kids through your research is going to empower instruction, yes, ma'am. I don't want it generalized. I want it Alachua County based. I want it specific to our kids in this beautiful city of Gainesville with a top 5 university. You know what I mean? Now, what your research can do, where it can really have some street cred, is have impact in the home next door.
Mm-hmm.
You want to?
Yes.
But I love University of Florida, by the way. No, I do. And I'm a product of the University of Florida, and I've gone back. But my degree on the wall shouldn't be the representation of University of Florida. That shouldn't be the only thing, We need y'all so much.
Mm-hmm.
We need you. We're dying.
So I know you just said that you guys revamped your education department within the last 2 years. So my thing is, I don't know what that looks like for you guys, but what I'm more concerned about is like pretty much everyone is talking about, like what the real reflection is in the classroom, and how often are you changing that curriculum? Because what we're seeing in the classrooms with the type of student and how quickly they're changing with all of the things that are changing around them. I mean, even just simply with the pandemic, we're looking at a whole nother type of student. So is your program reflecting truly what we're seeing in the day-to-day in the classroom? And I think that's where a lot of the disconnect is students are going into these education programs, and it's not a true reflection of what's happening day to day in the trenches.
Yes.
And so then they come in, and it's like, what? I don't know. I don't know what to do. I can definitely teach this content, but can I teach it to these children, to these students? And also with the internships, I think it needs to be a part of programming that it needs to be a floating internship, because none of these schools are the same.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic.
So that's super important, because a lot of the interns that we get, although they aren't necessarily education majors, they're still in programs. Like, we get a lot of the interns, like we said, for counseling. And even with that, they're stepping into our schools so far removed from what is actually happening. And then they feel inadequate because they're like, yeah, I have these skills, but I can't really impart them like the way that it needs to be, in the system. So there's just that huge disconnect there about that real day-to-day, what's actually happening amongst,
And also teaching them that they can make impact now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I would add some kind of class or classes that teach cultural literacy, that prepare students to understand and interact with communities who are different from them. And, that could be on a whole bunch of different levels, right? But it's a very necessary thing. So cultural literacy, I would throw in there, of course, because of where we work, understanding how to deal with children of trauma, because they all are, especially since COVID. And I think it's just, where are the layers of trauma, right? How do we work with that? And how do we build a classroom? I know when I was in my early 40s when I got my master's in education, and the big thing was, okay, where's the classroom management class, right? Which, yes, you need to be able to do that. But I think often how we're taught to do that is not particularly effective. I know that I have definitely used methods that were not particularly effective, but it's taught from a singular perspective, right? At least it was for me. I don't know about UF. I didn't go to UF, so I have no experience with that. But I really think all of that, like Carlonda is saying, the students that we have, and it's not localized to PACE, some of the challenges that we have, right? It's all of the schools, and COVID has done a number on all of our brains, and we see it a lot with those kids. And the last thing I would say, and I don't know how you do this, I don't know the logistics of this, is that there needs to be recruitment of more teachers who don't look like me.
And that's hard, right?
And retention.
And retention,
but that's
right.
not a UF issue.
Yeah, I really, when I taught for 1 year at Meadowbrook, an elementary school here in town, and a couple of my colleagues over the summer were saying how they had gone. It was something here at UF. That was PD, and it was about working with Black American children. And they were affronted that whoever was teaching them, and I don't remember who that was, kind of had the comment about, you shouldn't even be teaching Black children because they were white ladies. And they were really offended by that, and I was immediately offended with them because, what do you mean, right? Well, I wouldn't say that I shouldn't teach Black children, but I would definitely say I had a lot to learn about doing it effectively and thoughtfully and compassionately right? And not just putting myself first. And that takes work, right? You have to, I wasn't taught that at school. How do you teach that? You kind of live it, it's experience, right? And so especially for brand new teachers who are traditional age, 22-year-olds, you know, I mean, there's a lot that they simply don't have access to yet. So if they're floating around more schools, that's amazing. But I would look at those other things too.
I'm really sorry.
1 minute. Can I just say one more thing? Because she's here.
I know I can't say no to you, Stella. You know that.
Instead of classroom management should be about routines and procedures. Change how to reach and teach every student. That should be a separate course.
Yeah. And more about differentiating instruction.
Yes, God. Yes.
More about differentiation.
Write all this stuff down. You'll be available for UF needs to pay you for your labor. They can make an appointment with you, and you can just give them an invoice. Okay. On that note, thank you for coming, College of Education. Appreciate your
Thank you.
representation.
Thank you for showing up.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. All right. So it is time to close. And like I said earlier, people will be here until they're not. So if they're here, grab their business card, grab their number, take a look at all of our really cool posters, take a look at our resources, come take a tour of Samuel Proctor Center. We're just right upstairs. You can come, call us, check us out. We're pretty awesome. And I'm going to thank the panel and the linguists, the amazing experts here, and bring Dr. Ortiz back up to wish us all well.
All right, thank you so much, Rebecca, and thank you so much, our wonderful panelists. How about another round of applause for these incredible... So if there is a takeaway tonight, I would say, in fact, my staff, Tamara Jenkins, just flash me a card tomorrow. What does it say? I don't have my glasses. Okay, well, if there's a theme here tonight, I think the theme is we've got work, right? I mean, the connections between our dear colleagues at the College of Education, Alachua County Public Schools, the oral history program, the community. One of the things is we've got the message loud and clear from Mrs. Vivian Filer, who was mentioned earlier. So what we're doing on the part of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program is that in the fall, we are doing a community-based oral history seminar at the Cotton Club Museum under the direction of Mrs. Vivian Filer.
Nice.
And so our students will be, there's some things in terms of the production and equipment that the students have to learn here, but they can learn stuff here, but also work in the community. That's what we do. That's what we should do. That's where we should be, right? So it's really important that we continue to do that work. We're very blessed here to be in this incredible space, as has been pointed out. Our dear colleagues in the Graham Center are heavily involved in this thing called experiential learning. And one of the things the Graham Center is really focusing on, and one of my former PhD students, Dr. Kevin Bird, Kevin, wave your hand. So Kevin is experiential learning director, coordinator at the Graham Center. So he's another person who can be a good resource for all of us. Just in closing, I'll say this has just been so incredibly valuable. I have a number of former students who teach all throughout Florida. And I frequently do teachers' workshops in Florida. Unfortunately, in the last few years, really way more of them outside of Florida. Why am I doing teachers' workshops in Indiana and Wisconsin and New Jersey when I should be doing more in Florida? That's kind of an open question. But some of my former students who have been teachers in South Florida, I hate to say this, are no longer teachers in South Florida. They are no longer teachers in Florida. They have moved to California. They have moved to Washington, D.C. They have moved to New York. Why? Because they feel a lack of support. I wish they had seen this panel. the courageous examples that you all are upholding for us and saying we need to continue teaching these topics. We need to be there for teachers. We need to be there for our schools. We need to show up. The other takeaway I get is we need to show up at those school board meetings when one person gets up and says, oh, you shouldn't be assigning Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. I read that piece and that broke my heart. That book was banned when I was in high school, and it's still banned. You know, but see, if more of us, like me, starting with me, right, responsibility starts with self, showed up at the local school board meeting and said, Kurt Vonnegut, Slaughterhouse-Five should be taught in our public schools. Toni Morrison's Beloved should be taught in our public schools. Alice Walker, The Color Purple should be taught in our public schools. We've got to show up. So that's, to me, that's the main takeaway here is we've got work, we've got to show up. The exciting thing, too, is what we're doing really matters. Our students want this knowledge so bad. They want Black studies, they want Latinx studies, they want gender studies. Our students at University of Florida, GASP, want critical race theory. And these are the reasons that these things are under siege right now. Because there are some people in power who understand the landscape of our country is changing. The reason I do so many teachers' workshops throughout the country is an assistant superintendent of a school district will contact me and say, Professor Ortiz, I am a superintendent for a school district of about 300,000 or 400,000 students. We have recently become minority majority. We need a social studies curriculum that reflects our students, not the students who were here 50 or 100 years ago, but now. Oh, and by the way, Professor Ortiz, for history, we're tired of Alexander Hamilton. We've had enough of Hamilton. Not that he's a bad person, but can you give us other individuals in history that our students can identify with? The doctor's in. Yeah, we can. We can do it because of these research collaborations. We got to keep doing the field work. And so I'm getting ready to get on my soapbox, so I'm going to get off right now. But again, we have food, wonderful fellowship. To echo what Dr. Cordova said, let's continue the conversation. Let's keep the discussion going. We hope to see you on April 12th to witness with us, which is what is going to be an incredible program, the world premiere of the film Oscar Mack versus the Ku Klux Klan, an incredible Florida story set in 1922 with ramifications for how we live today. It's going to be wonderful. We offer extra credit, by the way. If you are an educator and you want to offer any of our events as extra credit, just let us know, and we can have extra credit sheets for your students to sign into. But again, final round of applause for our panelists, and thank you very much.